All right, so look, without further ado, our guest this evening is Kyle Pettis of the American Communist Party. Kyle, thank you so much for agreeing to do an interview. I have about like 14 questions here, and we can go for as long as you'd like. But I'm going to start right out with with kind of like my opener. So, right away, communism, the American Communist Party. There's a great deal of misunderstanding regarding communism in this country. Many people consider communism a joke, or they just consider it a failed system, something that never worked, while some people in America consider it this like terrifying prospect. Like, oh, the Democrat. You always hear conservatives say the Democrats are trying to bring communism to America. Just to clarify things right off the bat, how would you define communism?
To me, communism is the taking of collective responsibility of the working class of one's nation for the responsibility of that nation and its future. Right now in the United States, our ruling class, our oligarchs, our deep state, they are the ones determining the not only political, but the economic and, of course, the social future, the social life, the future of the United States. To me, a communist America would be the regular Joes and Janes out on the job sites that you're probably talking to right now, taking collective responsibility for our country and our nation as a whole, and guiding it in a direction that actually benefits all of us and doesn't benefit the elite few that run our day-to-day lives.
Right. Yeah, and I think, there's obviously a lot of parallels there, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, later in the discussion, between, what you describe as communism, or I should say, the way you describe communism, and what vision our founders had for our republic.
Of
Uh, but
course.
but just moving forward a little, so as I understand it, the ACP is a Marxist Leninist party. And I think it would be helpful if if you could describe for the listeners, what is Marxism Leninism? Like, how is that distinct from other forms of socialist thought?
Right. So Marxism Leninism comes on the scene with the rise of the Soviet Union, and not to get too deep into the history for the average viewer, but this arose out of what was called, Marxist circles in old Europe at the time, and these Marxist circles culminated into the formation of parties that were calling themselves social democratic or democratic socialist parties, depending on the country. Russia itself had the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, out of which, I should say, Lenin and the Bolsheviks came. Uh, so we have to understand the deeper tradition of Marxism-Leninism being rooted in that movement. Marxism-Leninism makes a specific improvement on the social democratic sort of movements in old Europe. It understands things like the national question, as Joseph Stalin put forward. It understands things like imperialism, like Lenin put forward. And it also understands that operating tactically and strategically on the ground, there had to be massive changes in how this was done. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia would have been the culmination of Marxism-Leninism strategically on the ground at that time. Of course, we don't live in, Tsarist Russia anymore, so tactics have to change, and we have to adapt. That's also the beautiful part about Marxism-Leninism is it's a science that is ever evolving, and as the pages of history turn, so do the material conditions on the ground, and every single country also on the planet has a different, unique sort of situation domestically, and as Americans, we have to be able to read this as well. And this is part of Marxism-Leninism as well. There cannot be just a copy-paste sort of analysis for every single country on the planet. Every single country is unique and has its own antagonisms within it.
Right. I think right off, like right away, you've really successfully dispelled a lot of the things that people become worried about or have anxieties regarding when they hear discussions about communism in America. A lot of people have this vision that communism means, like labor camps and, violence and chaos and, harsh authoritarian crackdowns. And, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but it's not to say that those parts of those things, and we all agree there's like dramatic exaggerations when people in America talk about that stuff. But it's not to say those things haven't happened in communist countries at different times. It just doesn't mean that we're going to implement those exact same things in America just because they're communist. Is that fair to say? Is that correct?
That's 100% accurate, and I would also like to add, I don't think that the Bolsheviks really had some deep down desire to establish labor camps and, uh, you know, um, politically repress people. They did these things out of really geopolitical necessity. When Russia was formed, when the Soviet Union was formed in 1917, there was an intervention by dozens of Western powers aiding the White Army, the Tsarist formation, during the Russian Civil War. You know, mass war across the land and all of the tragedy that comes with that, experienced by the Russian people. And there was a sense of we are under siege even after these Western imperialist powers pulled out of Russia. They still felt like they were under siege. And so there was an issue internally that, due to political necessity, there needed to be much more stringent control. Now, this is a case by case basis. Hope what we desire for the American people is nothing along these lines. What we desire for the American people is to uphold the traditions and fulfill the promises set forth in 1776 that all men are created equal, and we want to be able to have Americans have that equal opportunity at the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, in our eyes, this talk about the need for labor camps and mass political repression and everything else, um, we really don't see that as a form of necessity in the United States, and especially not amongst the American people. Um, we believe that the American people, if we are to overthrow the sort of oligarchical influence that currently is occupying the government of this country, that political repression of this kind is truly unnecessary. There's a completely different sort of spirit, and ideology among American people. We're extremely pragmatic. We're a pragmatic people. This goes into like Dewey and American pragmatism. Uh, we, this need Americans really only care about very tertiary things. They care about really the guiding ethos of this country, which is, like I said, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the ability for American individuals to have a good and healthy life and a successful life. And we don't see that at odds with communism, and we don't see that as, you know, um, sort of antagonistic to anything that we're going to be doing on the ground operating wise. In fact, one of the biggest emphasis of our project will be to empower workers in their local communities to form cooperatives, to essentially create small businesses for themselves, and to get together to pool their resources to create successful enterprises to provide for not only themselves but for their community. And we see that as critical to on the ground functions of the party.
Good. Yeah. And okay, so I kind of want to go really because I really want to try to dispel like as many misunderstandings as we can here, because I think that I really believe that's like probably the biggest goal of your party moving forward is getting it off, in terms of getting it off the ground, is right away convincing people how communism can be part of the political conversation in 2024. And with that being said, I mean, I think a big part of the reason why it's so quickly dismissed is because of the historical experience of communists in America. And specifically, what I'm talking about is the smearing of communism during both the first and second Red Scare, and then famously in the second Red Scare in the McCarthy era. And following McCarthyism and, this big campaign, to jail communists or accuse them of, espionage or working against the interests of their own government, there's been over time this sort of intertwining of communism and fascism as antithetical to what it is to be American, right? It's sort of like the Nazis and the Soviet Union were both bad, and communism and fascism are both bad, and authoritarianism and authoritarian, and then those two things are like the opposite of what it means to be American. And you and I would absolutely agree, and I'm sure a lot of people in the know would agree that that's a total fallacy, but nevertheless, many people in America believe that as just like they take for granted that that's true. So, how does the ACP plan to confront that situation in order to be able to spread class consciousness in America?
Well, I think it can't be dispelled merely by talking about it. And that's kind of the, like I said, the emphasis of the party is it's very important to establish on the ground that we are a force that is acting at the benefit and within the community. That's why I said once again, workers' cooperatives, small businesses, and of course, if we are ever to run candidates, it would be very much on the local level. We don't have any pretense that national politics is really our interest. It's really on creating situations where communities feel empowered, and we just want to, as members of these communities ourselves, we just want to assist in those in whatever way possible. You'll see us doing a lot of you know, um, volunteer work. You'll see us doing a lot of, sort of working within the community and asking them what their needs are and trying to meet it. Think how during the Cultural Revolution, Mao sent the Red Guards down to the countryside to work with the people. Well, we don't actually have to do that. Our people are already in the communities. Okay, so we just want to establish ourselves as a political presence formally in these communities. We already exist as individuals politically in these communities. It's just time to formalize and say, yeah, well, we're all we're working in a hundred different communities across the country right now. Let's all get on the same page and let's all try to make moves on the local level and see what's working. Maybe something's working in a community in Minnesota and we want to replicate it in Nevada. Who knows? A lot of emphasis on experimentation on what's working in different communities and seeing what comes out of it. Our party is going to be very results based, and with those positive results and those empowering of the communities, that's when we are actually going to prove to the American people that all of these well, for lack of a better term, lies that have been said about communism in this country, they'll be dispelled at that point. When you can look at a communist and see him as an upstanding member of your community and somebody who you respect, those lies and rumors go right out the window. I have a background in the unions. I'm a Teamster, and I'm a truck driver currently, and I was a shop steward for a period of time, and when I talk to my guys on the job about politics, I don't conceal my aims. I talk about the fact that I'm a communist, and at first maybe they're hesitant or whatever, but they see, I'm an upstanding member of the union. I always advocate for their, on their behalf to when we have to resolve things with managements as the stewards. And, it builds that respect. We have to bring respect back to the name of communism, not, um, pointless, endless discussions about what version of history is correct or not. These sort of avenues have really fallen flat in the last several decades in the United States, and they haven't produced results. People are just as entrenched as ever when it comes to the real historical legacy of communism, except when individuals water it down and take strange positions like that of the Trotskyist parties, for example, and reject the historical legacy of the Soviet Union or China or what have you. We don't have any interest in rejecting any of the historical facts, and we have no problem presenting them as they are. But we also recognize that, like I said, America is a nation of pragmatists. Every American intrinsically embodies that American pragmatism, and they're not going to believe it unless they see it. And our job is just to prove it to them and show it to them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that strategy. I mean, I think like it's a mistake often made by political movements of all stripes that, well, we just need to figure out a way to explain things to the people better. And it's like, no, like these beliefs are deeply embedded in people's minds, not just because yes, the capitalist class, right, controls the education system and all that stuff, but it's partially because we live under a set political, social, economic reality, and that if we want to convince people to support some sort of new, novel political party or movement, we have to demonstrate that we meet the people's needs better than the current political system, right? Or we're able to, like I would put it this way: the ACP's brand of communism is like the authentic expression of what a given community's needs are. It's not that you guys are going to preach down to people what they want, but they can express to the party what they want. The party can work with them to turn that into reality, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I that makes a lot of sense to me. And so I choose those words carefully too, the ACP's brand of communism, because even though communism is a fringe movement in America, you guys are not the only show in town, right? Like there are other parties, most famously CPUSA, right, is the biggest. You could also say DSA, which is even bigger, is a pseudo socialist party. They call themselves Democratic Socialists or Social Democrats. I'm not sure which, but my question is, how did your party come into existence? And are you or your members affiliated or connected with any other American socialist or communist movement or party?
Yeah, wonderful question. So the ACP, of course, we see ourselves because okay. So to get into how we formed, um, Midwestern Marx, Infrared, these Jackson Hinkle, these communities, and of course at a later period of time, Christopher Hillally representing the PCUSA, we got together. We had various conversations about the need for a new American Communist Party, but not new only in the sense of it's just arrived out of thin air. We also highlighted the fact that your party, a party that is seeking actually to claim the mantle of being the Communist Party, there has to be some, we have to understand some historical legitimacy here. Um, Around this time, when we were already planning to move forward with the party, I had been in contact with many of the petition movement individuals who were within CPUSA. As you may have heard, and your audience may know, I'm on Midwestern Marx, and I was interviewing many of the petitioners who were inside the CPUSA, extremely disgruntled. Many of them, everybody I talked to had been purged. There were still many people within the party who had not been purged, but were in the process of being purged. All unconstitutionally, all in violation of their rights as party members. The national leadership, the district leadership, was all acting in complete violation of party procedure, bylaws, everything. I've read the Constitution myself. It's evidently clear. So in the midst of this crackdown, I had approached very key members of this petition movement, and I had very frank conversations with them. I let them know what we were intending to do with the launch of our party, and suddenly we have parties from across or clubs from across the CPUSA already ready and willing to immediately sign on to the ACP. And we have to understand that these are the real inheritors of the legacy of the CPUSA. These are the real followers of Foster and Winston and other, heroes of the CPUSA from their time. The current clique, if I may be frank, that occupies the CPUSA is not communist in any meaningful sense. They're merely just gatekeeping the term, and it's a real shame. It's really unfortunate. Like I said, the CPUSA has a vibrant history and legacy in this country. Has many heroes that have come out of it. It's really unfortunate that we're in this situation. We actually, at a certain point, were trying to have a conversation with Joe Sims from Midwestern Marx, and we had a meeting on the books and everything. And about a week before the convention, Joe Sims pulled out of these meetings and refused to have any form of conversation with us. So we'll never know what was going to be said. We will never know if we could have had a diplomatic approach to Joe Sims and the CPUSA. And unfortunately, that decision was made for us on his end. So it's all of these things going on at once that really give birth to the CPUSA, or sorry, to the ACP, out of the CPUSA and also out of the PCUSA. The PCUSA, if you're not familiar, split off of the CPUSA in about 2014. Once again, main issue was endorsement of the Democrats and not following constitutional procedures and everything else. So they had a lot of similar gripes to the petition movement. And when we're coming to the forefront, they see this as a kind of a mending of that schism in a way, as a unifying force. A lot of people are only seeing the negation. They're not seeing the actual affirmation of what the party is actually becoming. We've mended this schism for the most part. From what I've had estimated to me, about 80% of the membership of PCUSA has left and is in the process of applying to the ACP. The PCUSA also had its own litany of issues. Christopher Halali was the only member of the national leadership at that point that was anti-Zionist. The other ones were saying that Israel is a legitimate state. They were citing historically incorrect statements that are taken wildly out of context from the Soviet Union. And it's just really unfortunate. And there's unfortunately, this is the situation that these parties have put themselves in, and despite that, the movement of communism in this country has to go forward. We can't allow parties like these to hamper and hinder the development of communist thought and practice in this country. We have to move forward in spite of it. I don't wish these people any ill will. I wish that they could have stuck with principles instead of making these really egregious errors. As it relates to the DSA, frankly, I don't see them as in the same category as us. The DSA is, much like I said previously, they're like the old Social Democrats of Europe. They're about 200 years out of date at this point. I'm not too concerned with what the DSA does. I don't see a pipeline of people going from working class Joes to the DSA to communism. I really don't. And every effort by the DSA has been made to hamper those. I know there was a movement around 2016 in the DSA of Marxist Leninists explicitly. That was crushed by the DSA, and they started implementing rules and regulations within their party to clamp down on explicitly communist individuals within DSA. So if they don't want to be communists, we say good luck. That's fine. We're fine with them not being communists. They can be social democrats and they can do what they do. And when individuals from the DSA realize that they're, like I said, 200 years out of date, the door will be always open. The other biggest game in town is probably the PSL. The PSL is an interesting organization. I don't think that we share the same historical legacy once again. Um, but to that end, we're always willing to work with fellow anti-imperialists. I just don't think that we see eye to eye on the trajectory of this country domestically. And so once again, that's why we're not in the PSL. So.
Right. All right. So there's a number of distinctions there between you guys and the existing parties. And, I think that works to your benefit. I mean, I think it's fair to say that those parties have really achieved nothing. I mean, like, we started this conversation talking about the myths and rumors around communism and how, let's call it, unpalatable the word communism is to most people in America. Those parties, and not to say that there wasn't a time where they did good work, but these days, I mean, they've done almost nothing to dispel those rumors. And it's like we talked about before, it's not from a lack of ability to explain it to people on their part, although maybe that is part of the issue, but they haven't done anything really for people
Right.
to earn their trust or to win them over or anything like that. And so if you're on the left in this country, you're frustrated with the progress or lack thereof of left wing movements, it makes sense to kind of support a new party that understands the problem and intends to tackle it from a different angle. So, jumping ahead a little bit.
No, one thing I think I didn't. Yeah, one thing I think I didn't answer was part of that question was international. And as it relates to the international, of course, we have Christopher Lawley, who's the international secretary of the party. He has already signed a bilateral agreement with the Georgian party. I forget the exact title of my mistake. So our Georgian comrades made a very explicit bilateral agreement between our two parties. If I understand correctly, he's in Russia right now, so I would expect some big news coming out of there. And he has very good relations with dozens, and that's not an exaggeration, dozens of other communist parties and formations across the world. And we'll be making conversations with them as well as even those who currently are in state power. So there are really great things on the horizon. Our international comrades have been longing for this day for decades. We've been told explicitly behind closed doors. And I would just keep an eye on that. Like I said, there's big things are coming internationally, um, and I hope people are able to get excited by that. I can't obviously, give you guys too much info, but uh, it's very exciting to me. So.
Well, yeah, and we'll be on the lookout, right, for that. So, okay, just kind of transitioning a little bit. I mean, I know that, and full disclosure for the audience, right? Like, I'm a former member of CPUSA. I left the party, I guess it was about a year ago, or more or less. There was a fight, actually, an all out, not physical fight, but an all out, debate, argument in my local club regarding one member who wanted to bring an American flag to an event, and another member who said, well, the flag represents imperialism, it's this tyrannical symbol, blah, 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 blah. Typical, like, ultra left kind of talking points. And it was a serious disagreement between these two individuals. But behind closed doors, speaking with a number of party members, most party members didn't feel that strongly about having the flag at the event. They really weren't against it. And I've always kind of found it curious that communist groups in America, they shy away from any kind of symbolism that demonstrates that they're an American party. But with the ACP, a lot of the party's promotional material contains imagery and music that feels very authentically American. Can you explain the party's views on patriotism?
Yeah, I can be really brief and frank here. The only real American patriots are communists. Like I said in the beginning, what does it mean to be a communist? It means the people of this country, the working people, taking collective responsibility for their country. I don't see how that's out of line with the Declaration of Independence. I don't see how that's out of line with the ideological premise that the United States is based off of. Um, this is fundamentally the guiding ethos of the American people writ large. And to me, if you call yourself a patriot and you aren't a communist, well, then I don't really think you're that much of a patriot. I think that you have fallen maybe into what Parenti calls super patriotism, or you've fallen into something maybe even darker and deeper. And I would call upon those people who do call themselves patriots. Do you not believe in the American people enough to say that we are the ones who should be running everything? Why do we need um, a oligarchical clique telling us what to do? We don't. And if you also look, a lot of these oligarchs, uh, the ruling class is Sean O'Brien touched on this in the Teamsters speech at the RNC. The oligarchs of this country, the ruling class, they don't have any form of national pride. They don't care about the nation. They care about lining their pocketbook. Most of these guys, girls, whatever, these people, they're in bed with foreign governments trying to undermine our sovereignty as a nation, as a people. And they don't care if their wealth is measured in dollars or euros or what have you. They care only that the number continues to rise, their bank accounts continue to grow, and they care not for the suffering of the American people or the stripping away of their national sovereignty or their individual rights. So how you can ascribe to a political system that is at the heart of and call yourself a patriot is truly beyond me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's well said. And, look, it doesn't mean, I know that there are people who would probably argue, well, being like jingoistic or nationalistic is bad and counterproductive and whatever. But that's, in my view, that's not really what you guys are preaching here. It's about, you guys are communists. You're a communist party because you believe that that's the best way for Americans sort of to take control over their government, to take power back from the oligarchs, as you describe them, or these big money interests. I talk about it all the time on the air. The people who really rule the country, the lobbyists. This upper stratum that controls almost all the wealth and all the political power. And so, if I could sort of simplify what you said, I would just kind of put it as, the American people taking their country back. Um, and so another question I have right away, because I know communism, some people have sort of wrongfully associated it automatically with like atheism because of the state atheism in the USSR and other countries. So I want to know, like, what's the party's stance on religion, if you have any stance at all?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think that there's really nothing that's deeply incompatible between communism and religion. The party itself, I mean, we're not taking any specific stance on religion. If you want to be, a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, it doesn't matter. Your religion is your religion. These religions exist, and they existed even in the Soviet Union. There's a lot of misconception about the history of what state atheism meant back then. Really, it was just that the state wasn't involved. There were periods of times of political repression against priests, like during the Civil War, and the Orthodox Church was directly aiding the White Army during the Civil War. But these things were rolled back, and political tolerant or religious tolerance was well versed in the political life, well founded in Soviet society. So Yeah, like this is just a McCarthyite boogeyman, and once again, I can say all of these wonderful things, but none of it means anything unless you see it on the ground firsthand. I mean, I've been processing hundreds of people into the party as I speak. They cite involvement in their churches, involvement in their mosques. I know many of the people who are applying. I've met with them firsthand, in person. I've gone to events with them. I've talked with them. I've broke bread with these people. They come from a diverse religious background, and there's nothing incompatible about that. We don't feel the need to micromanage the religious affairs of people's lives. Um, it's really un-American, quite frankly.
I mean, look, there's a lot of people that would argue, there's a ton of consistency between religious beliefs, specifically those in like Christianity, which preaches, helping your fellow man and forgiveness and all of that stuff. There's a lot of compatibility or similarities between religious beliefs and what communist parties, and really communism as an ideology. It's inherently like a liberating ideology that is about ultimately uplifting humanity. Which I think is there's a lot in common there with religion. Um, so okay, so then look, this is all positive, I think, and it sounds great, but it's kind of curious that like there's been a lot of, I think, a lot of online backlash in response to you guys launching this party. And most of the backlash seems to be coming from leftists and left
Hmm.
wingers, not the right. And these leftists and left wingers, they call you guys fascists, they call you guys racists, sexists, all sorts of things. That you wouldn't get any of that from their promotional material. So I got to ask you just point blank, like, what do you think is causing this smear campaign? And it can only be described as that because it's obviously an effort to discredit you guys outright.
Yeah, I there has been a massive smear campaign online. Some of it is actually, textbook slander and defamation, and in those instances, like I believe was even mentioned in the comment section here, alluding to the party having some sort of involvement with some sort of cryptocurrency. Uh, we've already publicly made clear that this isn't the case. This is clearly some sort of malicious actor. And people who continue to make that claim, we have uh, we have a legal department in the party. I mean, we're a legal entity. We have lawyers. Steps have been followed for ensuring that slander and libel, and defamation. These things are dealt with. Now, people having their own personal views and not making ridiculous claims, but having a negative opinion about the party. This is America. You're free to think what you want. But it's very clear to me and to others on the executive board that there are bad actors out there, and a lot of them are wolves in sheep's clothing and leftist spaces and everything else. And we know a lot of these people. We've been dealing with them individually within our own old organization, or like Midwestern Marx, Infrared, all these other organizations that have existed before the ACP. We've been dealing with them for years, and there's really, like I said, unless they're engaging in an act that's libel, defamation, slander, any of these things that are actionable, they can say what they want. But the moment that it crosses that threshold, you can expect that they will be having some legal recourse on our end. Because it's inappropriate, and it's honestly it's ridiculous. A lot of the claims that are being made, my good friend Christopher Halali, I've met with him many times. I've worked with him for a while now. Very very good friend, fourth generation communist. He's honestly he's an amazing man. The amount of slander and libel I've seen about him, it's disgusting. These people, I don't know how many times that Midwestern Marks, Infrared, everybody else has proven them wrong. I mean, they've tried to dox us. They've tried to, make insinuations of threats against us in the past before. Um, it's just these people. I don't know how people still trust them. I don't know how people still give them the time of day. I really don't understand it at all. But At the same time, I understand that not everybody's familiar with these actors as intimately as we are, unfortunately, and people have natural concerns, and all we care about is that normal everyday Americans don't fall for this nonsense. Leftist spaces, I look, there's a reason they haven't gone anywhere for decades in this country, and I'm really not super concerned about whatever they say about us. I mean, they have no real intimate ties to working class communities in this country. Most of them are despised explicitly by these communities because of just really the feeling the need to act like the HR department in their spaces. It's not compatible with the American populace. We think we are, and they're welcome to try to engage with the same communities we do. I don't think they're going to get very far.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that one. And, look, I think you addressed this next question partially in your answer there. But, we talked about McCarthyism. Look, communists have historically faced backlash from the U.S. government. So, what's your party's strategy to prepare for a larger smear campaign? I mean, if the party grows, it stands to reason that the smears will grow as well. Um, you know, there's always the risk of something like a neo McCarthyism. I mean, like, I know that, Trump and the conservatives and even members of both parties have spoken out against, the extreme left, extreme right. They've used Marxism and Marxists by name as something that they want to stop. So, what do you think or let me rephrase that. What's the party's official strategy? Do you have one in terms of dealing with a potentially larger, more coordinated smear campaign?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. The deep state exists. Of course, they're going to come after us. In my opinion, elements of the deep states have already made moves. It is what it is. The reality is that the only way that the state can crack down is one, if you're engaged in illegal activity, which we never will be. And I say that, very obviously. We would never be engaged in illegal activity. We have no plans of doing anything that would incentivize the state to come after us in these explicit ways. We have our political stances, and that's what we hope to sow the seeds in the communities that we operate in. Um, and of course, these political stances are against the deep state. But as it comes down to, are we going to, commit illegal acts against the government? Absolutely not. That's not in the cards. That's I people who openly advocate for this are simply asking to have the CIA draw a crosshair on their back. That's not at all what we're interested in. And the other thing is that the deep state only works when the party is separate from the people. When the party is one with the people, when the party is in every single community, on everybody's lips, everybody knows about it, everybody's at least sympathetic or at least not antagonistic to it, when we've dispelled the propaganda that the deep state has pushed on the American people for decades, um, they don't have any way to come after us. They really don't. And the other, I think, most important part, which is something that American communist movement has not embraced, is total transparency. All of the financial records of the party will be completely transparent. You can look it up immediately as a member of the party. Everything that we are doing as a party, transparent. So if everything is in the open and everybody is aware, and there's no corruption to take advantage of to turn people against the party, there's no illegal activity that the deep state can use to label our party extremist or terroristic or anything along these lines, then what can they truly do?
Yeah, well said. I think, okay, well, I don't think there's actually a long history of, and in case the listeners or viewers are ever interested in reading into it in your spare time, just Google COINTELPRO. There is a long history of the FBI and the federal government as a whole using infiltrators to enter political organizations, typically left wing, and encouraging members to participate in violent activity for the sake of arresting all the members. And so, as Kyle said, and this is the official line of the party, American Communist Party, is they don't engage in illegal activity. Just putting that out there, and that's very important. And so, okay, moving forward a little bit. I mean, so we talked about the ACP's. I called it the ACP's brand of communism, but really, it's just what communism really is, and that's the authentic expression of what a given community's needs are. Right. So I do want to talk about our community here on Long Island. This is going to broadcast to Suffolk County, which is pretty much the eastern end of Long Island. So one of the biggest problems facing people on Long Island is the lack of affordable housing. So what is the ACP's view on the housing crisis, and how would a communist system attempt to resolve this problem?
Yeah, I think that look, the economy is in shambles. Workers are working longer hours than, let's say, 20 years ago for the purchasing power of what they had 20 years ago. That's the reality. Um, there is no political stability for the working class whatsoever. You can have even a multi-generational family and still not be able to afford a home, especially in a place like New York. Um, what can we do in the immediate sense? We can try to maneuver politically on the ground. We can ask the community their solutions. We can advocate for our communities. We can push for trying to get people into local office for the purpose of bringing in the construction of new homes, new zoning, things like that. There's a lot of avenues you can do on the local level. But really, these issues, you're talking about a fundamental problem with capitalist economics. The housing crisis is cyclical for a reason, just like the boom and bust of the market is in general, and this is due to the anarchy of the market. So, a long-term solution, of course, you know, just like in pretty much every single communist country across the globe, you build new houses for people and you charge them practically nothing so that your people have places to live, because a homeless population is not a population living in dignity and respect, and that's the guiding ethos of being a communist, is that you want the common people to have dignity and respect in their own land. You can't have that if there's no houses for people. So um, I hate to simplify it, but how would I solve the housing crisis? Well, if I had state power, I'd build more houses. So sounds absurd, but that's there. That's really it. Um, you're gonna find that a lot of communist answers to things are, we can go and we can talk back and forth about the deeper problems facing our current society, but the solution is really simple and it's really pragmatic and it just makes sense. Um, so there's my answer in the long and short.
Yeah, I mean, the pragmatism is appreciated because, I think politicians are aware of all of these problems. Local, national level, they're aware of what people are struggling with. It's just abundantly clear to me, and I think most Americans, that they just do nothing about it. And to some degree, everybody's aware that that's intentional, right? It's they can
Mm-hmm.
use that as a leverage point to win elections.
Well, they do it intentionally because, as well, I mean, the majority of American politicians are backed by land speculators, which is a specific segment of the American oligarchical class, the bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call it. These oligarchs, their interest is explicitly in the never-ending, increasing valuation of land and property, because they are landlords. That's all they have. Is their capital is derived on the financialization of the valuation of the property that they own, and rent extraction. And that overall in American society at this point is how the American economy operates. Even, companies like Starbucks, for example, the majority of their income doesn't come from the selling of coffee. It comes from financialization, rent extraction, and speculation, more or less. So this is the fundamental issue: is that the American people themselves don't even own their own land. And to be clear, I'm saying the solution is to build more homes, but to be a little bit more in depth, the actual fundamental issue with this country is that we need general land reform. We need Americans, all shapes, sizes, races, hues, gender, whatever. We need Americans to actually own the land of America, not some 1% of Americans to own the land. We need all of the people to own land in the United States, in America, I should say, wider context. Um, Americans don't own anything these days. They don't. The heyday of when America was prosperous and the American people felt enfranchised to the system for the most part. Obviously, there was racial issues and divides and everything else, was the 1950s and the 1960s when home ownership was through the roof. Um, but fundamentally, this was a time period where there was racial exclusion and everything else. We understand that Americans are Americans, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Americans, we need general land reform so that Americans can re-enter that period of time where they actually feel like they are part of the country that they live in. They feel like they're part of the political and economic life of the very land that they live on. Right now, Americans, by and large, have a sense of national nihilism, or they have a sense of, like I was saying previously, this sort of super patriotism, and this turning into a longing for a day that really didn't exist, but was back in the, sort of a fairy tale of what they envision America to be. That's because it's both. It's two sides of the same coin of rejection of what America actually is. It's because there's no actual relationship with the American people and the very land on which they are standing right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, again, it's like a lot of this stuff is just consistent with the way we've been defining communism all along. You know, once again, the authentic expression of what a community's needs are and the people taking control of their country back, right? So it serves our interests and not the interests of an elite. So look, another issue facing residents in Suffolk County and Nassau County is economic inequality in general. I mean, you mentioned before, like life in New York and the prospect of starting a family in New York for most people is kind of unfathomable unless you come from wealth already, because it's just so obscenely expensive to live here. Long Island is a great example of that. I mean, the cost of living here is astounding. And what's upsetting also is you don't get a lot in the way of public services. You don't get a lot for your dollar. But nevertheless, it's really expensive to live here. And, as a result of that, there's like this mass underclass here living side by side with the ultra wealthy. I mean, I'm sure you and well, obviously everybody listening to this on the radio is familiar with like the Hamptons and these very upper crust communities. They're right next to or not far away from, community like Riverhead, or even, a different part of Suffolk County, a town like Wyandanch, which is very, 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 economically, disenfranchised. So talk to me about the communist view on this problem, economic inequality. How does a capitalist economic system create and exacerbate inequality?
Well, I mean, to be really frank, how do the people in the Hamptons make their wealth? Is it through the sweat of their own brow, or is it through the, extraction of wealth from the sweat of another's brow? Let's just be frank. I mean, I don't think the people in the Hamptons are swinging pickaxes in mines. I don't think they're driving trucks on highways. I don't think they're sailing the seas to deliver freight. I don't think they're involved in infrastructure construction in this country. But they sure have a role to play in how their wealth is created, the individuals who are doing that. It's because they are parasites. They are extracting the wealth that is generated and created by the laboring class for their own enrichment, and not for the enrichment of the individuals who are doing the work. And this is, fundamental to Marxism. This is the basics, if you will. Now, in the immediate sense, what are ways that we can combat this? Well, like I said, we have a very strong emphasis on empowering workers that have skills. For example, I have, for the past year, been assembling blue-collar tradesmen from across the country into one channel of communication for the purpose that when the party launches, these individual tradesmen can start general contracting companies and things like that. They can pool their resources together to enter the market as a collective group, as a cooperative, or even as a small business if it's preferable to them, and with the purpose of obtaining union contracts, becoming union workers, and gaining contracts to do, the work that they're skilled in doing. The difference here is that they're removing the capitalist overlord that extracts the wealth from them. They are just going to work themselves. They're essentially entering the general labor market as a collective group and splitting up the costs necessary associated with that. And as these formations become economically more and more viable, and with assistance and from the National Party, I'm sure these things will expand. I'm sure that blue-collar workers with the same skills will be more and more inclined to want to see what the whole communism thing is about, when the guy that they used to work with now is he's got a much nicer paycheck. He's got nice union protection on his job, and he's actually a lot happier, maybe working shorter hours in a lot of instances because he's not dealing with inefficient foremen, for example. Very small scale, of course. I mean, this isn't solve the problem nationally, but we have to prove that workers have the power. They don't need the bosses. They don't need the lackeys of the bosses. That workers themselves know what's best and how to run a country, run the economy, and be productive. We don't need to be told what to do. We already know what needs to be done much better than those who are currently making the decisions on what to do. So why not show that, even in a microcosm, even on a small scale? We have to demonstrate that to the American people and get them involved. Show them that they themselves, that we are not separate from the people. We are the people just as much as they are. We have the same skills. We come from the same backgrounds. Show them that they should join us and they should engage in the same way that we are. And those sort of economic formations, they can't be outsourced. They can't be broken, because it's the people of the community fulfilling the needs of the community.
Yeah, I think that statement in and of itself, more than anything else said in this interview so far, I think a lot of working class people on Long Island, that's exactly what they need to hear, and I'm sure resonates strongly with a lot of them. I mean, again, to anybody listening in Suffolk County, which should be a majority of the radio audience, we're all familiar with a town like Wyandanch or a town like Central Islip, and you look at the communities there, and it's shocking the fact that they exist side by side with these really, really, really wealthy areas. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And as you say, these incredibly wealthy people, it's not that they're, working to create a better world or a better society for us all. It's not even that their labor produces anything. It's often people who are manipulating, financial instruments in a certain way to get a small fraction greater return for some other rich person, and they're compensated enormously for this, and it's not sustainable, I think, is the core of my argument. And it seems to be that, in your view, not only is it unsustainable, but the alternative is that much more appealing to the real working people who do the actual work in society. And so, look, another issue on the island is the opioid crisis. I mean, there are certain towns on Long Island. I mean, Smithtown is a great example, but there's an endless number of them that have just been devastated by the opioid epidemic. I mean, overdose numbers through the roof. You know, a majority of what first aid responders do is really, Narcan treatments here.
Mm.
It's a real tragedy. In fact, I'm an educator in Suffolk County, and it's mandatory that we learn Narcan training in case a student overdoses in class, which is something that was unheard of 20 years ago and now is like the norm. But in addition to the opioid crisis, there's a serious, just general mental health crisis. On Long Island, it's seen, every single day, especially among young people. I think a lot of people consider it to be like a spiritual crisis, that America is going through, and maybe to some extent that's true. But I would argue, and I'm curious your thoughts, that this is really the result of America's political economic system and a lot of the corruption and problems you and I have been talking about. So, do you see that connection as well, the opioid crisis and the mental health crisis and America's political and economic system as it currently exists?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would like to say actually, it's both. One begets the other. When a people is beaten down, trampled upon, and completely politically and economically disenfranchised from the very country that they dwell in, what is left for them? What is genuinely left for the subject under these conditions? There's not much. So why not blow it all away? Shooting up Skag or whatever. Doing these horrendous drugs. That ruin people's lives, ruin families, ruin communities, and you have to have an amount of sympathy for these people. They've fallen into something that's awful. But we also can't forget that once again, what is communism about? It's about working class people taking collective responsibility for their country. In a community, we should be taking collective responsibility for the members of our community. If people are falling into drugs, then we must help and educate them. We shouldn't go too far in either direction. We shouldn't uh, you know seek punitive action against these individuals, but we shouldn't coddle them either. We should be very blunt and clear that what they're doing is wrong. Try to assist them. Try to bring them to facilities where they can receive the help that they can get. Um, I'm not familiar with the area that you live in and that you're talking about. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, um, a place that is, I imagine, just as ravaged by this opioid crisis as New York is. It's truly awful to see the situation on the streets these days. Not a day goes by that you can not drive throughout the city and see the direct effects of individuals overdosing. At least here in St. Louis, I mean, it's abysmal. Um, we have to walk a fine line and make it clear that this sort of behavior is unacceptable in our communities, but also making sure that these people seek the help, get the help that they need and are rehabilitated. Um, in addition to this, we need to be extremely vigilant against those who are pushing these substances within our communities, who are encouraging people to get hooked on these things. Um, we need to, you know, take a very harsh stance against individuals. I mean, if you, let's say, you know somebody who is pushing these things and selling these things in your community, I mean, you should be very clear to this individual that this is socially destructive. That yeah, they may be making money, they may be doing whatever, but this is destroying the fabric and the moral fabric of our society. And you're showing people that it's okay to give up, that they should abandon the life that they have, that they should abandon all hope of a future to get blasted a couple times before they eventually overdose. For what? Are these people's lives so worthless that the little bit of money that you may be bringing in from selling this crap is worth that. I mean, it's murder on an industrial scale, and I don't want to just focus on the individuals on the selling on the street side, but let's also look at the interesting connections much further up in the pharmaceutical companies. What plan do they play in this? Pushing things, these heavy, addictive opioids with a prescription, um, getting people hooked, and then suddenly, oh well, we can't keep giving you the pills anymore. We've addicted to you to them for a year, even though there was many other treatments. They just, this makes us the most money. Um, we've addicted you to this for years, and now we're taking it away. You can't afford it, but it's an opioid. You can you can fulfill the same fix from some smack. So that's what they go to. I mean, it's a disgusting cycle. It's a disgusting cycle, and throughout the entire cycle, it's parasites preying on their community.
Very well said. Yeah, from the local drug dealer all the way to the pharmaceutical executive, it's parasitic one way or another. And I just want to mention, as well, like the opioid crisis, as you mentioned, it's something that is now, well, it has been established as part of the national conversation. But in my view, we're sort of living through a second sort of pharmaceutical crisis with the over prescription of ADHD medications and benzodiazepines for anxiety, drugs like Xanax. Those drugs are extremely addictive, extremely bad for people's health, and often lead to people turning to street drugs to, feed their addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, to me, Adderall is just methamphetamine. That's truly how I see it, and I think that it being pushed on, especially targeting the youth of this country, has been for decades. When I was growing up, that was, people were pushing Ritalin on 5 and 6 year olds. Um, it's disgusting. Thankfully, American parents are growing more and more every single day, more aware of what is going on. Um, but the system seems to be silent, and its silence is truly deafening. I worry every single day. I'm a father myself. I have a 6 year old. Um, you know, I've been starting to hear from the school that he attends. Oh, he has attention issues. I tell him I don't want to hear anything about that. I really don't. Um, he's hyper. He's a 6 year old boy. This is just a fact of life. Uh, we're not. I would never put my son on any form of ADHD medication. It's awful for children, and I don't want to say this is a claim of the party. I'm speaking as a father myself, as an individual. It's just to me, it's the same cycle that they try to do with the opioid crisis. They're just doing it to kids, which I think is even more disgusting.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you on that. And, okay, so look, another important issue locally, but also nationally, is like the healthcare question. And, like, let's be honest, the healthcare conversation, when I was a younger man, we used to call it the fight for universal healthcare, right? And now it's become, the push for Medicare for all. It was a crucial issue for the Obama campaign in 2008. It's probably what got Obama elected. And it was a huge part of Bernie's rising popularity. It seems to be that, though, that despite the fact that lots of politicians will use this as leverage to get them elected, nothing comprehensive has been done to address this issue. I mean, Biden said in his goodbye address the other night, more Americans are insured now than ever before. But I think if you took some sort of national survey, most people would agree that they would probably describe themselves as like underinsured or at least not adequately insured. I mean, what's the party's view on this, like the lack of access to affordable healthcare in America? Do you have a solution you could propose? I know maybe it's not a policy thing you have off the top of your head, but maybe even just describe the connection between this and, the capitalist system we live under.
Yeah, I don't think any substantial legislation is ever going to come from DC to address this issue. I really don't. Obamacare was an abject failure, in my opinion. It sure it you can say maybe some alleviation to some people. For the overall majority of Americans, no, this isn't the case. They're still completely either uninsured or underinsured, as you put it. I like that. Uh, Healthcare in this country is really a joke. It's for the rich, just about like everything else. Um, you know who actually is the segment of the working class that has some of the best access to healthcare? It's union members, union rank and file members. Things like team care from the Teamsters. When I was in the Seafarers International Union, we had our own health insurance for every single member of the union. It was guaranteed. I didn't pay a dime for it. These sort of collective insurance policies for working class people. Uh, this is really the only solution that I can say has had any effect on the day-to-day lives of the average American. And I would, once again, our primary interest in uh, building working class relationship on the ground in our communities is to have our own businesses, cooperatives, and everything else. And of course, I think they should come with a union contract, and I think they should come with trying to, through their union membership, access these sort of services. So that's my instantaneous, in the moment sort of solution. On a larger scale, of course, I mean, if we were in state power, what would we do? Just like we would build homes and land redistribution, we would build more hospitals and we would provide for the people who need health services. It's really quite simple. Um, but in the current system, these things are not profitable. It's viewed they're profitable in one instance. They're profitable how things are now. If they were to expand healthcare coverage, that would mean quite bluntly a reduction in their profitability. It's because these things are scarce that and also once again, they're scarce because they're so expensive and because there's a high profit margin for insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, private health care. I mean, it's absurd. Um, there's in my mind, really, I don't fully understand why healthcare in general needs to be a profitable thing. You would imagine that the state should ensure the health of its citizens. That being the people of the country in a communist system should ensure that the people of the country are indeed healthy. Um, I don't fully understand how people who are profiting off of a clearly inefficient, uh, murderous, frankly, system that we have of healthcare in this country. That I don't understand how they, in good conscience, can sleep at night profiting off of the misery of hundreds of thousands of Americans every single day. Not sure that if something happens on the job, something happens to their child, um, that they'll financially ever recover from it. I think it's a despicable system, and I think Americans across the country know that. I think that they intrinsically know that it's a despicable system. The question isn't how bad is it, because they live this experience every single day just as well as I do and you do and everybody listening to this. It's what do we do to change it? And I think that we have at the American Communist Party we have to be very much in touch and hear the concerns of the people on the ground in their local community and assist them as we can. In some cases, it's just a situation of lack of access. Maybe they do have insurance, but the nearest hospital or clinic or anything along those lines is hours away. Especially in rural communities, this is the case across the Midwest. Maybe putting pressure on local government to ensure that there are adequate healthcare facilities in the area is an avenue by which we can start to alleviate some of these issues. But when it comes to things like insurance and everything else, unfortunately, in the current framework, we don't have the ability to address that directly. My solution, as I said, is try to put workers together in their communities to pool their resources to create small businesses, cooperatives, and everything else. And on that footing, it's much easier and much cheaper for cooperatives and small businesses to engage with the insurance market as it is to individuals engaging with the insurance market. So that is my little insight on the insurance question, I suppose.
Great, yeah, well said. And so look, so just to go into really two more questions for you. I mean, one of them pertains to what I would consider a really important issue for every American, but maybe people on the very, very local level would disagree with me or wouldn't see the connection. But I'm talking about, of course, the two major wars going on in the world right now that America is directly connected to. And that would be the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza. So, could you just explain what's the party's view on both conflicts? I mean, the reason I think it's important to every American is because, very simply, we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars supporting both of these conflicts. We're sending billions to Ukraine, seemingly on like a annual basis, a quarterly basis. And, Israel is a country who we've supported to the tune of billions of dollars a year for decades. So, what's the party's view on these two conflicts?
Yeah, so talking Ukraine, Russia, the we do not stand with Ukraine. Ukraine, in the sense of the government that is imposed itself on the people since the Maidan coup in 2014, is illegitimate, unconstitutionally founded, and we do not recognize it or support it. We fully back the Russians in their endeavor to assist those living in the Donbass who, for 10 years, or nearly 10 years, have lived under constant assault from the Kiev regime. People like to think that this conflict, much like the next conflict we'll be talking about, started at a specific time and date. This is false. It started when the Maidan coup occurred in 2014 and overthrew President Yanukovych and installed a puppet government explicitly backed and controlled by the West, and set upon a punitive campaign against any region of its own country that wasn't in line with this. And it did this on an explicitly ethnic basis. The Donbass is home to majority Russian-speaking population of Ukraine, and they seceded legally, constitutionally, from the Kiev government because they felt like the usurpation of Yanukovych's government was illegitimate, which it was under all international law and the Constitution of Ukraine. Um, and these people have been fighting for their sovereignty for years and years and years, a decade now. And before the Russian special military operation came to provide direct military, aid to the people of the Donbass, they had been being shelled day in and day out for years. Thousands of them dead. Children, women. It's disgusting. The barbarity that the Kiev government acted with against their own people, supposedly, against citizens of Ukraine at the very least. And it's also disgusting how when they've been doing this for years and years and years, which, by the way, supplied by the United States, of course. Well, I should say by the government of the United States. The American people have no say in this. Um, them doing this for years and years, and then suddenly Russia steps in and, backs people being shelled in their own homes. Suddenly they cry wolf. Suddenly they cry the victim. I find it ridiculous. I find it insulting to the average intelligence of the American subject. I find it ridiculous that the goons in D.C. who run our government feel any inclination to send our money, and I say that again, our money, to these this element of scum in Ukraine. Um, how many times do we have to send our tax money, money we earned that's taxed by the government, when it gets sent off to some puppet dictatorship to impose unpopular will against its own people? And how many times does that have to end up in a bloodbath before we stop funding these atrocities abroad? And that leads me into what we're going to talk about with Gaza. The people of Palestine, we fully support. We fully support the people of Palestine to resist the Zionist entity in any way that they see fit. This is an issue of national determination for the Palestinian people. Um, Frankly, I have no respect for the Zionist entity that is occupying the Palestinian lands. It should not exist. Um, we have been very clear about this. If you would like to read more about our position on the Palestinian liberation struggle and a illegitimate public official calling himself Netanyahu's visit to the capital, you should check us out on Twitter. We have released a full press statement. For the sake of brevity, I won't read it here. I just encourage you to come and look it up.
Great, yeah. And okay, so look, so one final thing for us to talk about is the upcoming election. I mean, there's been a ton of major political news in the last 2 weeks. I mean, probably two of the biggest stories of the year. The attempted assassination on Trump, and then, of course, Biden stepping down. But, I just kind of want a general sense here. Like, your party is brand new. They're not in power yet. They're not involved with electoral politics currently, at least not directly. But just curiosity, and I'm sure the listeners would probably like to know, what's the party's view on each candidate? Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. Does the party endorse either of them, or is there any official endorsement? What do you have to say about that?
Neither Kamala Harris nor Donald Trump give a. Sorry, I can't say that. Damn, it's the radio. Uh, Neither Donald Trump nor Kamala Harris care about the American people. They don't care about you. They don't care about us. They don't care about the country that they live in. They are merely puppets of an oligarchical order in this country that purely exists at your detriment. We don't have any horse in this race as the American people. Um, I, I myself and members of the party probably were a little bit more sympathetic to Trump 4 years ago when he was carrying on more populistic sort of rhetoric, trying to getting people, actually thinking in some ways. But what did he do with that? What did he do with that for 4 years? He did absolutely nothing to assist the working people of this country. He did absolutely nothing to curb the deep state's influence on our daily lives. He did absolutely nothing to challenge the real power of this country, which is this elite clique of oligarchs. In fact, he took all of their nominations and put them into his cabinet. So, and for those on the other side of the populist sort of aisle, I think Bernie Sanders would have done the same thing. I'm just going to be blunt. Um, None of these people are good on foreign policy. None of these people really embody what it means to even be American. I have nothing but contempt for both parties. I have nothing but contempt for this imposition of a false dichotomy on the American people. I think the American people every single day are becoming more and more aware of the fact that both the GOP and the DNC are not they're not doing anything for us, and I think that's why when Joe Biden announced his that he was not going to be running in the next election in this election cycle, he was stepping down more or less. We announced the launch of the party on the same day, and on Twitter, you can look up the metrics. I mean, we still went viral. We kind of broke the algorithm, even with this big piece of political news occurring at the same time. And I would also like to say, like this, in my mind, it clearly articulates our position. We don't care about which clown is occupying the Oval Office, because at the end of the day, there is nothing fundamentally going to be different on the ground for average Americans until we understand that the system that we have is fundamentally broken and a political alternative is a necessity. And we hope to show Americans through our work and our effort on the ground that we are worthy of being the home for that.
Great. All right. Look, this has been a great conversation. I'm so happy you agreed to come on. Just to wrap things up, I mean, could you give us the audience, the where can we find out more about the party? Your social links, website, anything you'd like to plug.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'd like to be very explicit. Anything that you see that isn't coming from this website, because like I said, we're all about transparency, um, isn't us. So if you go to acp.us, that's us. And you can see on there every single statement that we have officially made and a link to our only existing social media at this moment, which is ACP Main on the US. And as chapters are formed, we've launched only a couple days ago, and I'm still processing hundreds of applicants. As chapters are formed on the ground, you will see their official social media start to pop up and appear. And if they're in your area, then you can see all the good work that they're doing on the ground there. So I encourage everybody to go to the website, and if you're interested in the party, maybe think about applying.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, no worries. Glad to be here.